Fellow Falcoholics, what is up? Welcome to another episode of the Dirty Birds and Brews podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Ida Falcoholic Kevin, joined today for the first time by JP Acosta from SB Nation. He is at Acosta32 underscore JP on the hell site formerly known as Twitter. JP, welcome to the show. Excited to finally get to talk to you because we're talking about Michael Penix today, and that is the topic du jour among Falcons fans. Everyone's real excited. Before we get to that, though, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. How about yourself?
Good. We were talking before the show. It's finally hot up here in Syracuse, so I had to turn on the air conditioner. So if you guys actually hear buzzing in the background, I'm sorry. I have to use window units. No one has central air in New York State, apparently. After living in the South, I found that totally crazy to comprehend, but it is a thing. But we'll power through it. Excited to get you on, JP, because I know you just wrote a banger over at SB Nation talking about Michael Penix and the stuff that you saw on tape that made you excited about his potential this season. And I know Falcons fans already believe most of this stuff. They probably wouldn't even need you to have the article to believe it, but I think it's nice to have the analysis to back up that excitement, and that's going to be sort of what we get to today. Before we get into that, guys, we're going to dive right in. I want to get you a real quick word from our sponsor, BetOnline. Folks, BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for all your sports betting action with baseball season in full swing. We're also at the end, unfortunately, for the NBA and NHL, both of those leagues going into the finals, so you can get your last bets in. And, of course, BetOnline's got more ways than ever to stay in on the action with the latest odds, news, and scores, even live in-game betting while the games are being played. We keep the dog days of summer rolling with the largest selection of odds on everything. So even after those sports are finishing up, they've got updated odds on MLB, UFC, boxing, tennis, NFL futures. BetOnline remains the best online source for all your sports wagering info, and in between games, you can hit up BetOnline's online casino where they've got all the top Vegas-style games, including poker, live slots, all that good stuff. If that's your jam, make sure when you sign up to use our promo code BELIEVE. It's BLEAV when you go on over to betonline.ag. BetOnline, the game starts here. All right. JP, great article, by the way. Everyone should go check it out on SBNation.com. It's a good mix of intense analysis, which I'm a sucker for that, and then it's also got some nice clips, and it's not too crazy long, so don't be too intimidated, guys. If you want to go check it out, you can get through it in one sitting. But right off the top, I know you're just excited about what you saw about Michael Penix, and that's obviously encouraging for me to hear as a Falcons fan, but not a huge sample size, so we have to take that into account. But tell me about some of your main takeaways from that intense film watch of Michael Penix last season.
Yeah, so when I was watching Michael Penix, I expected to see a quarterback that had a little bit more flaws in the offense because he was thrown in towards the end of the season. It wasn't going to look pretty, and there were some mishaps. There were some misfires that I'm sure we're going to get to later. But one of the things that really encouraged me was the mitigation of negative plays. He didn't take a lot of sacks, which I thought was super impressive for a guy who, coming out of college with multiple bad knee injuries, I thought he'd be more of a statue, more of a stiff in the pocket. But no, he's able to maneuver. And the biggest thing is he's found his answer against pressure, which is beating pressure with his arm and with his mind. And I think that's something that a lot of young quarterbacks don't really do. Right now, they don't really have a lot of answers versus pressure outside of scrambling. And you're not exactly the best athlete once you get to the NFL. But Penix has found his ability to beat the blitz, beat pressure. And I thought that was really impressive. And then the biggest thing is you can tell the difference in how the offense was called when Kirk was in the game versus when Michael Penix was in the game. Whereas I think the Falcons offense was successful in getting from A to B in the 5-yard completion and some of the stuff over the middle that Kirk Cousins was really good at. But they lacked explosiveness on the edges of the defense. And I think that's where Michael Penix really was able to shine. He's really good at moving defenders on the edges of the defense. So there are plays. Everybody loves the deep corner route to Ray McCloud against the Panthers. That was an awesome throw. But there was another one, I think a couple plays before, to Drake London, where he moves the corner in cover 2. He moves him up onto the Kyle Pitts out route and then throws the corner behind it. He has the arm strength to absolutely drive these passes in, but the confidence in moving defenders on the outside of the defense where he only has to move one guy was something that really stood out as well.
Yeah, I love both of those things about Penix. something that we saw and were scarred by, with Desmond Ridder was just kind of the inability, like when Ridder faced pressure, it broke down pretty quick. And already in just a few games of Michael Penix, you can see, he's got sort of that cool head under pressure, even getting thrown in, kind of at the end of the season without a lot of reps behind him, certainly not a full off season, not even really much time. The Falcons didn't exactly time it up great with the bye week or anything either to give him a smooth landing. They were kind of just like, well, here you go. And that there's obviously a lot of drama background behind that, with the Kirk Cousins stuff, but this is not a Kirk Cousins episode. This is a Michael Penix episode. So, yeah, I mean, I think what really stood out to me was sort of just the calmness, the ability to get through reads, to be able to get to where he needs to go. And like you said, some of the advanced quarterbacking skills that even guys that are experienced in college don't necessarily get to show in their rookie season because everything else is so hectic. They're usually not dropped into the best of positions, especially if they're a high draft pick. But here in Atlanta, Penix actually had, a good system around him, good weapons, a good offensive line. We could start to see some of those things. Like you mentioned, him being able to look off corners and have the confidence and the wherewithal to start showing those sorts of advanced quarterbacking skills. Like that's what fans were hoping to see from Kirk Cousins. And it's like, well, now we're seeing Michael Penix do it. It's like, why were we starting Kirk Cousins again? No, but we're not going to rehash that, guys. We've talked about Kirk Cousins enough on this program, but, that was one of the things that impressed me the most, and you mentioned it as well. Like just he's advanced mentally, and that's part of being a 5-year starter quarterback who's had extra time in college thanks to unfortunately some injuries. But that to me is a big reason to buy in, is that he's already showing some of these traits and abilities that you would expect to see from much more experienced quarterbacks.
Yeah, and I think the biggest example of that, of course, it was the Giants defense, but in his first start, New York threw a lot of stuff at him when it comes to pressure looks. They were throwing mugged up linebackers at him. They were bringing nickels off the edges. And something that stood out was even if the Falcons didn't address the pass pro correctly, Michael Penix knew where he was going. He would see the blitz and he was able to beat it with his arm, like I said. So there's a play where they bring the nickel hot off the edge. He's unblocked, like he sees him coming. But he's able to diagnose that and get the ball out quickly, move the chains for a first down. And that's something that not many quarterbacks, let alone the quarterback that played before Penix, was able to do. Especially in this offense, you have to be able to keep the timing up. So I think that's something that really stood out to me when I was watching him, because I expected to see a young quarterback who kind of struggled against the complexity of NFL defenses. But he was able to diagnose those and get the ball out really quickly. That is a major feather in his cap.
Yeah, it's exciting stuff, and it's why I think you get even more excited when you start thinking about him actually having an opportunity to get to play with these guys and spend the offseason as the starter, and that should help even more in that regard. The other thing you mentioned was being able to attack the outside, especially the deep sort of outside of the field. And that is notoriously one of the lowest completion percentage areas of the field when you're throwing those deep routes to the sideline, because not only do you have to, you have to get it past the corner, but you got to worry about the sideline too. So the placement is so critical there. And Michael Penix just seems to have a feel for how to hit those sideline shots, and we absolutely saw that. And I think it helps a lot that he's got sort of the ideal receiving core to be able to take advantage of that. And I know you mentioned that in your article as well, but that's one of the most exciting things to me that we saw from him.
Yeah, and I think with the outside passing, Michael Penix, his talents are really fit for attacking the edges. He has a cannon for an arm. He's able to rifle those passes in on the outsides of the defense, so he's able to get the ball up and over a defender on the edge of the defense, but also keep him on the sideline. He's also able to keep him inbounds, and I think that's something that really stood out. It's just the arm strength to get the ball to those areas of the defense without forcing the receiver to hold up, without asking them to slow down their route. And again, these are lower percentage passes. So like I said in the story, the 58% completion percentage, it looks pedestrian, but when you look at where all the passes are happening, those passes deep and down the sideline are naturally lower percentage throws, because you're always, like you said, going to have to deal with the sideline. But the fact that Penix was able to take those throws and make those throws often is a promising sign for ways that the Falcons can continue to keep the offense explosive while continuing to develop Michael Penix skills in the in-between game.
Yeah, because that is one of the weaker parts of his game, and you could see it in college too, is that he's just so damn good at throwing the outside passes that I think just the comfortability throwing inside, where things can be muddier and in the NFL can be very dangerous depending on who you're going up against. He's just not as comfortable there. Not that he can't hit the throws there. That's certainly not a problem. I think it's the confidence and the trusting. That stuff I think naturally comes with time in the NFL too, like in the system. That stuff in the middle of the field, it just gets muddier. Like if anybody's ever tried to like try their hand at, hardcore Madden plays or whatever, where you're trying to throw those inside routes and you're actually playing against an opponent that knows what they're doing. Like that's a very simplified version of what we're talking about here, but you can see how muddy this stuff will become even a video game version of the setting. And so I'm not super concerned about that, but that is one of the points I'm sure we'll touch on later that he has to kind of improve, because teams will start sitting on the outside or really leaning that way if you don't diversify where you're throwing the ball. But that's another thing you mentioned with the completion percentage and everything. Those throws are lower percentage passes. So if you're going to build an offense out of the deep passing game, you're going to be you're going to have more boom bust stuff happening. It's just sort of the name of the game. But as long as you're booming more than you're busting, you can make a Hall of Fame career out of that. I mean, we saw that from many quarterbacks over the years. And it's, I think, also a product of, sort of where the Falcons found themselves. Like, against the Commanders, who kind of showed up as one of the better offenses in the NFC, certainly, if not the NFL as a whole, Falcons had to go out and into a shootout. And it's like, all right, well, I guess we're just going to have to, just hammer this thing down the sideline to keep up. And they did, we went to the point where it was like, whoever got the ball at the end of the game was probably going to win that. And that was, one of the best games that I watched all year. It was a really fun game. And then with the Panthers, inexplicably, the Falcons defense decides to just, take that week off, and it becomes a shootout again against the Panthers. And then it's like, well, it's just bombs away. So I think that's, certainly part of what we saw, is that he just kind of had to unleash the dragon, to use a Rex Grossman reference. But, and it was hella fun. And we got to see, I think, some of the special traits that he possesses in that sort of game script.
And you can see the difference, like I said, in how the offense is called with Penix in the game versus with Kirk Cousins. And the offense with Kirk, you were able to get some more of the successful plays. Like, you're able to get the 4 and 5 yard stuff, but with as good as the run game was, you don't necessarily have to get the 4 and 5 yard passes. What they were lacking was the explosiveness. They were lacking the boom plays, like you said. And so now what happened was every defense could constrict on the middle of the field because Kirk Cousins couldn't hit throws on the outside. And that's ultimately what caved that offense in, on top of Kirk Cousins not being able to move. So if you have a guy like Penix, and something that I learned from watching not only Penix, but all the rest of the rookie quarterbacks, is lean in hard to what he's good at right now, and then continue just to add in stuff that he needs to improve on, continue to add in more difficult things as he continues on throughout his career. And I think that's going to be important for this season, because this is technically his first full season as a starter. He won't play a full 17-game season until week 12 or something of this season. Like, there's going to be a lot of ups and downs, but the promising thing is that you know what you're going to get with Penix. You can see some of the mitigating disaster plays, and then the explosiveness. That's something that I think is really important. If you're able to reduce the turnovers, reduce the sacks, and hit big plays, that is Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen. Those are what the best quarterbacks in the game are able to do, and Penix was able to do that in a small sample size.
Yeah, and that's the critical part, which is that there are a lot of quarterbacks that come through college being able to blow you away with these deep balls and this aggressive style of passing, but when they get to the NFL, they never really are able to sort of convert that into consistent play, because in the NFL, the turnovers happen more frequently. The defense is much faster. The windows are tighter. Every little thing has to be perfect, or you're going to throw picks in the NFL. And a lot of guys just have trouble making that transition, even the really talented ones. And Penix, I don't think there's ever been a concern about the arm talent. That's obviously going to help. It's going to help cover up those errors, right? If you can rifle that ball in at an elite level, you can be a half step late, or your footwork can be a little sloppy, or, you could be slightly off on your drop timing or whatever it is. You can get that little extra window, which is nice to have, especially for a young quarterback where things are just not going to be perfect routinely. And I think that does give Penix a lot of leeway to sort of continue to grow into some of the things you mentioned in the article. And we'll get to that stuff soon. But yeah, before we get to some of the like tempering expectation stuff, at a reasonable level, how do you see this sort of next season playing out? Because I mentioned earlier, like, I just think the offense around him, you look at what they brought in last year, and everyone ostensibly thinks this is about Kirk Cousins. And, with Darnell Mooney here and, Kyle Pitts, who is the center of, basically every conversation this week, apparently, that offense to me never really felt like this is the ideal Kirk Cousins offense. Maybe it was the Kirk Cousins of like 3 or 4 years ago type of offense, but it always felt like they were more crafting this for Penix and his strengths. So I think it actually works out now where Penix is coming into a situation with a receiving core that it is actually kind of fits his talents to a T.
Yeah. You look at what Zach Robinson did calling this offense. It is probably one of the purest distillations of the Sean McVay, like West, like Rams, outside zone, boot action, throw the ball downfield type of offense that we've seen outside of like Minnesota. And I think that benefits Penix's strengths right now, like we said, with some of his averseness to throwing over the middle and just the ability to attack downfield. If you're able to be explosive through the air, you can be a bit more successful on the ground game. You don't always have to throw the ball over the middle of the field. I think that's something that we're seeing a lot of. We see it a lot with the Green Bay Packers. I think the Packers do a really good job of hiding some of Jordan Love's flaws with having a really successful, really dynamic ground game and just saying, look, man, we're going to do play action. You throw the ball 80 yards downfield, someone will go down and get it. And that's something that I think this next season, like I said, you want to continue to do the stuff that Penix is good at right now, which is attacking the edges of a defense while just sprinkling in a little bit more of the middle of the field stuff, just adding a few more things to his plate every single game. You don't want to try and give him the master's level QBing stuff on the first game of the season, but what you want him to do is continue to grow into that. This is not you come into the NFL and you're expected to be like senior level when it comes to diagnosing the game like Drew Brees, but you want to continue to add that stuff in to make him more comfortable. But like we said, like the Falcons have the playmakers, they have the play calling. I think the protection is good enough. And really, it's just about continuing to develop Penix and see how far this thing can go.
Yeah. And on that note, I mean, what are you hoping to see from this Falcons team in terms of the offense? Are you hoping that they will continue doing things sort of like they did last year? Are there any new wrinkles you think would be great to see the offense sort of throw in to help both Penix's development and sort of the upside and consistency of the offense as well?
I think the biggest thing is you want to continue to add in, like I said, some of that middle of the field stuff. I think adding some more screen game stuff would be really helpful. And then just being able to move the pocket a little bit. I think there's some issue with pass protection. I think Caleb McGarry still has his issues as a pass protector, despite being a good run defender. There are still some issues there in pass pro. But if you're able to move the pocket a little bit, you're able to mitigate some of their flaws. And Penix has shown that he can move. He can throw the ball in a moving pocket. So that's something that I'd like to see them continue to add. And just a little bit more screen game, a little bit more of the quick game would be really helpful to this offense. But I also think that's an area where Penix can improve.
Yeah, I think that was one thing we saw is just some of those short throws. And again, it's a small sample size, so it's like, if he had 5 more opportunities to throw a screen, maybe it looks a lot better. But yeah, there were just little things that were off. The placement was a little off on some of that stuff. And I know, at one point, especially the first game that he started, there was just a lot of missed connections, especially on the deep balls. And that's hopefully something that will be mitigated with, more experience throwing to these receivers deep. But I agree with you. Like, one thing they do need is sort of an answer. Like with Kirk, it was like they needed to have the hot routes like ready to go because Kirk wasn't capable of navigating the pressure. So if he got pressure, it was basically he's going to dirt it or eat the sack. And I was kind of surprised they didn't have more quick stuff for him to get to. This year, Penix can move. So I think we'll probably see more of the short passing stuff. That they do have some good players for that. I think that's one area where Ray McLeod can really be an asset for you. And then Bijan is obviously he's a really special player, and you just kind of figure out ways to get him those dump offs or just see if he can leak out. Because if he gets out in space, it's really dangerous. And Bijan's hilarious because I feel like he catches the routine passes and it doesn't look super great. But if you throw him something and he has to catch it with one hand, then it looks easy, So that's just one of his things, I guess. But it has the potential to be a really fun offense with a great group of skill position players. I think Kyle Pitts in particular, like this is the first time since Matt Ryan's been here that this is actually set up for him to have a significant role, but also like have a quarterback that can deliver with that role. Like last year, things were going okay until Kirk got hurt, and then it was like now he can't throw that deep ball anymore, and also he just doesn't seem to like you very much, which that's its own thing. But Penix, the one thing that everyone kind of leans on with Kyle Pitts and Michael Penix is that like final play in the Commanders game where it's like we're going to Kyle Pitts, like this is game on the line, season on the line, we got to score on this play or it's over. It's Kyle Pitts there, and they complete that. That's one of my favorite plays that he had all season. But since Kyle Pitts is the topic du jour, what do you think about the Pitts situation? Well, just a quick thing. Do you think this is a good fit for him to stay in Atlanta? Do you think they sort of stick with that, or is this whole trade buzz thing actually gonna pan out?
I think they should stick with him for one more year to try and figure it out. I think the biggest thing that the argument for keeping Kyle Pitts around is the fact that Michael Penix is now the quarterback. You have a much better quarterback in this situation, albeit a young quarterback. But I think where Zach Robinson can kind of incorporate Pitts more is just like you said in those dump offs in the short game. And I think that's something that Pitts also needs to continue to improve on. He was always more of a vertical tight end, but being able to do the in-between stuff, I think that'll help kind of create layers with the offense because Drake London is the in-between guy for this offense, and they don't really have the explosiveness outside of Mooney downfield. So if you can get Pitts to kind of do some of that in-between stuff as well, I think you can really help create layers within the offense. But this is it. With all the trade buzz, with all the negativity surrounding Pitts, this has got to be the year that he becomes a more serviceable player. I think that the Falcons, it was kind of weird watching the Falcons because I also think, again, with them being the purest form of the McVay offense, they ran a lot more 12 personnel than I thought they would with Charlie Warner in the game. But Pitts in 11 personnel, you should be able to do some more work in the receiving game.
Yeah. And I think like Pitts is a great guy to run clear out stuff because he does have such great long speed. Like he doesn't even have to run full speed to threaten, and get the safety to move. But I think the problem is Pitts is tired of running clear out routes. Like you have to throw him some of these. Like you can't just ask him to clear out every time and then be like, yeah, we're not actually going to ever throw this. Like teams stop caring about it. So
it's like I remember coach calling them the F off routes because all you did was just run down the field. You effed off. You went and like chased grass while we ran the actual play behind you. So if you can get Pitts some more designed downfield targets, I think that'll really help open up the offense.
Yeah, and that's my thing is like, yes, he is good at running clear out routes, but throw him the ball too. Like, come on, he's your 4th overall pick. That was just one of my biggest beefs. Was like, man, I can't believe Arthur Smith took this guy with the top 5 pick, and then just was like, well, I can't really figure this out. So just go run clear outs for us, Kyle, and we'll figure out we'll give everybody else targets. But obviously, Kyle Pitts is not happy about that. But yeah, I am excited to see. I would like to see Pitts in this offense with Michael Penix, and whether there's a future here in Atlanta, I think that's definitely up for debate given Falcons have to pay London. I don't think they're going to consider not paying London and that, also Pitts. So it's like, are you going to pay Mooney, London, and Pitts? Probably not, right? One of those guys is going to have to go, and maybe it's eventually Mooney, but I mean, not after last year. You're not moving on from Mooney. So it'll be interesting to see how they navigate that. But I would like to at least see them try it, see them get it out there, and if Kyle Pitts has that boom season, you can always tag and trade. The tight end tag is just not very expensive, so that certainly could help in that regard. Or you tag him and see if you maybe put together a run here. That would certainly make Falcons fans happy. But let's talk about a couple of the things that you mentioned that are areas to kind of pump the brakes on and things that we do need to see Penix improve on to really reach this exciting sort of ceiling that we're hoping to see in 2025.
Yeah, the first thing, and it's really funny because Michael Penix is like a golfer who knows how to hit the ball off the tee. He is able to put some RPMs on the ball, and then when he gets to the green, there's a little bit of issues. And I think for him, it's just the lack of touch. And that's something that came up in the Washington game and some of the first few starts, especially on those passes downfield. There's just a little bit, there's not enough touch on the passes. He's always trying to make it a fastball when sometimes a changeup is needed. Sometimes you need to throw a little off speed. And I think that's an area where, whether it be through his mechanics, where he kind of loses some torque on the ball throwing downfield, but if he's able to try to get some more touch on those passes outside the numbers, I think that'll really help him. And then again, it's some of the aversion to middle of the field. Some of that, I think, again, is sort of the mechanics. I noted in the story, I talked with my colleague Mark Schofield about some of his mechanics, and it was kind of like he was letting his back leg not come all the way through, which means he's going to lose a lot of that force that he generates. So it feels like he's throwing all arm, which kind of makes the ball kind of die over the middle of the field. Or there's just a general rookie aversion to throwing in that area. Like you said, those windows close really quickly.
Yeah.
And so I would like to see him work a little faster over the middle of the field. And that's something that you ask for a lot of rookies, for a lot of young quarterbacks. If you can work faster in that area, that'll really open up the offense a lot more. But the biggest thing is just the touch. If he's able to develop we're not asking you to add a driver, just a little pitching wedge. Let's add a pitching wedge to your golf bag, and we'll see what happens from here.
Yeah. Yeah. And part of me thinks that's just rookie sort of nerves where it's like, I just need to go to like, I don't necessarily trust that I have time to make this throw. So I need to rifle it in. Like I can't risk this getting picked off. And that's not the worst way to go about it. Like if it's not getting picked, it's not the worst thing in the world. But as I think hopefully he gains more experience, he'll be able to tell like, okay, now I understand the corner's like 2 yards off. So I can throw this, with like 80% instead of 100 and it'll be okay, and oh, this guy's further away. I can throw this at 60 and just feather it in and it'll be an easy catch for my guy. And one thing I did love about Penix was he actually showed some stuff, about he tried to protect his receivers in a lot of situations where like that's more, again, that's further down the line where it's like I don't have to think about completing this pass only. Like I'm not just at the first step. It's like, oh, my guy, I see the safety coming. All right, if I can throw this just a little outside, that can help him get just outside the safety's shoulder, and he's only going to get, just at the edge of the safety instead of that whole hit. And that's a big deal for if you got playoff aspirations. If you get your receivers killed, good luck. You're gonna be hurting by the time you get to week 17. So I really enjoyed watching that too. It's just the little things, and you mentioned a lot of them in the article. Which again, guys, go to SBNation.com. Their article is Michael Penix promising film shows why the Falcons quarterback future could be in good hands. Great article, great piece over there on SBNation.com. Not just saying that because I also work for SB Nation, but it's a good piece. It's a lot of fun. Anything else on Penix you want to touch on before we wrap up, JP?
Yeah, you actually noted something that I actually forgot to mention in the piece, but him being able to protect his receivers. That was something that showed up in the first game he played against the Giants, where I think it was Kadero Hodge running an over route, and the safety is flying down. Like this is pure hospital ball territory, but he's able to throw the ball a little behind them to protect the receiver from getting KO'd. There was a quick game throw against the Panthers where he's trying to lead Drake London away from the linebacker in coverage, and London kind of goes too far in, and he ends up throwing an incompletion. And those are the kind of things where I'm like, oh, I see where you're going with this. You just need more reps. And that's something that now that he's the unquestioned starter, I think he's going to get a lot of those reps, and I think you're going to see a lot more growth from him. But overall, I'm really excited to see what this looks like. Of course, there are going to be bumps in the road because, again, he won't be a full 17-game starter until like week 12 of this upcoming season. But the stuff that he showed in the early portions of his career have me very excited for what will happen down the road.
Yeah, me too. I think this is, after getting hyped up for Desmond Ridder, which is not experience I wish on anyone. This is a very different situation where we're parsing, a few games of legitimately exciting throws, and everyone mentions the stat, but it's like he threw like 6 big time throws in one game, and it's like a lot of guys threw like 6 big time throws like over half a season or so. So it's like now that part of that was the game script where I think the team was like just go, like whatever, like just go, just throw it, we don't care, like we gotta it's a 40-point shootout, just go bombs away, and he delivered. And you look at the stats, and the stats by themselves, like you said, it looks kind of like and so many people are obviously, if you're not a Falcons fan or you're not a dynasty owner or someone who's really interested in trying to harvest fantasy value or something, you're going to look at Michael Penix Jr.'s stat line and be like 58.1%, 3 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. This is just
and even the
exactly
were hilarious because they were peak Falcons plays.
Yeah.
Like one was a wrong route that I think both Raheem Morris, Michael Penix, and I think it was Hodge on that play, or it might have been Ray McLeod against the Commanders, where it was like, yeah, I just ran the wrong route. And then the other 2 were drop passes that end up right in defenders' hands. Like even you could say that if he threw 3 interceptions, go watch the interceptions and you realize none of those were his fault.
Yeah. I mean, especially the Kyle Pitts interception was just you summed it up perfectly. It's just
it got memed into oblivion.
So, but at least Kyle Pitts got an opportunity to redeem himself with that great touchdown. But I think those are not you're not putting that on the quarterback. But again, if you just look at the stat block, that's why I think we get all these people that are like, oh, well, we don't got to worry about that. And I think people should be a little bit more worried about Michael Penix if you got to play the Falcons this year, because this team is not in a position like they've been in years past, or even to some extent with Kirk, where they have to limit the offense to be able to get it done, or they're going to lean entirely on the run game. And if you could stop the run, you're really not going to have too much trouble with this Falcons team. And I'm excited to see how the deep passing, the consistent deep passing game that Penix unlocks could be exactly what the Falcons need to really unleash Bijan Robinson, because Bijan's had to deal with stacked boxes like his entire career. Even last year with Kirk, teams didn't really have to worry too much about deep passing. That Cousins could beat them, in the intermediate game, and he did have some really good games mixed in, which was nice to see. Unfortunately, it fell apart in the middle of the season, but now I think that consistent threat that Penix presents, and after the first few weeks, I think teams will know, like, we really can't stack the box, because not only can the Falcons hit deep throws, they will throw them. Like, Michael Penix is going to throw that ball, so we can't do it. And I think just the simple change from the Falcons going to playing stacked boxes to probably seeing a majority cover 2, or at least, some kind of quarters or whatever, they're going to see more DBs on the field, and they're going to see guys further back. That could be a big deal for both the passing and the run game, which, you feel like Bijan sooner or later is going to be the rushing crown champion. And this could be the year where the teams are still kind of figuring out what this Penix offense looks like. And this could be Bijan's time to shine as much as anyone's. So excited to see that.
Yeah, I think I'm really excited actually for what Bijan Robinson can look like in this offense. I would not be surprised if he's up for major awards at the end of this season.
Yeah, he's special. He's fun, and there's so many good running backs playing right now. It feels like the running back renaissance is like officially here. So that's great for all of us running back enjoyers. But hoping that the Bijan will be in consideration this year for those top awards like you mentioned, and this offense as a whole. Hopefully will be really exciting. The defense, we'll have to see on that one. That's the big question mark.
They'll get there.
Yeah. I do feel a lot better after the draft that like we're taking this seriously, and I like the players they added there, and hopefully this thing will work out for Atlanta. Although I have been saying that for the past 7 years, and so far I've been wrong every time. But maybe this time it'll work. Maybe this time they'll make the playoffs. So definitely the best quarterback they've had since Matt Ryan. So excited to see that. JP, thank you so much for coming on, guys. He's JP Acosta, once again, at Acosta32_JP on formerly Twitter. I refuse to call it whatever the stupid name is now. But JP, anything else you want to let the people know about before we sign off?
Nope. Just follow me on Twitter, see what I'm doing, see where I'm going.
Excellent stuff, guys. I'm Kevin on Foul Call. Kevin, thanks for watching this episode of the Dirty Birds and Brews podcast. We'll be back next week with mandatory mini camp takes here. The last bastion of real news until training camp. So, dig in for that. But if you enjoyed the show, please like, subscribe, all that good stuff. You can check out our Patreon. It's patreon.com/FalcHawk Live, as well as the YouTube channel memberships if you're more of a video enjoyer. Until next time, guys, thank you so much for watching and listening with us here. We will see you next time. Have a great day, folks. Thanks.